It's time for a lesson. Before we get started, for all of the beginning artists out there, there's something I need to teach you first before we go to today's lesson, and that's to deal with how you feel with your pen. Because when you're starting with your own stuff, whether it's digital or on mobile or on paper, each one has a very different feel to it, even though there's like slight differences or obvious differences. Everything varies from pastels, crayons, pencils, and pens. So, to begin with, you should grab a separate sheet of paper or a scrap paper, just something exposable to try out with, and try to do light waves and strokes of your pen. Very light, as light as you can, like near to not visible at all, or just lightly tapping your pen on the sheet of paper or on the tablet. See as much how light you can go, and then try to gradually press down on your tablet, pencil, and try to get a feel for it. Because once you know how everything feels, everything should be easier. Loosen up. Don't do strong lines like that. Don't do that. But instead do very gentle strokes and lines. Another before we could go to our main lesson for today is to do some quick and easy light strokes. Quick and easy light strokes. Quick and easy light strokes because you're going to need them a lot, especially when sketching, especially when you're going to do long lines like these. Of course, confident artists can just do straight lines like these. If you're confident enough, doing quick and light strokes will help you get a grip with sketching. Because if you're doing it slow enough, you might actually find yourself faltering a little bit, like these. If you have a keen eye, you'll see what I mean. And compared to quick and light strokes, you can easily make lines like that. Try to not waver too much and do random strokes like that. Try to get them as straight as possible because you'll need them for this lesson. Though it's not really about sketching I'm going to teach you today. It's actually about perceiving stuff. For example, shapes. Today's lesson. You know these simple things like the square, the triangle, and the circle. They're pretty simple things to do, but like once you get used to doing them, you'll start to see them as the foundation or the building blocks of almost every art. Let me show you. One of these shapes is actually the square. Remember, quick and light strokes. Quick and light strokes. Try to get them as straight as possible, doing them as even as you can. It doesn't really have to be a perfect square, but over time you'll learn to quickly make squares just like me. If you're confident, do them thicker and faster, and then you should be able to do them consistently. Doesn't really have to be a square sometimes. If you can't do squares yet, start with a rectangle like these, quick, thin lines, and then make them flatter into at least what you think is a perfect square. Now, all of these squares, why are they so important? Because they're like the backbone of most architecture, like buildings and houses and such. For example, here is a building. It's based around a square. Even a house, a simple house like that, is also a square. Even something like metroway stations, or not metroways, trains itself. They're the basis of everything that's related to the architecture. Even your mobile phone, it could be considered as a square because it's just flat like that. Now again, to make sure to get it down, because once you get it down, you'll easily can make buildings, or at least simple buildings at least, with light and thin strokes, thin, fast strokes. trying to do them as straight as you can without using a ruler. You don't really need a ruler for most of these things, unless you really want to get very accurate. Now, if you're looking for how to occupy space or how to perceive space and such, then now if you're looking for something like perceiving how everything looks in a space, then look no further than the triangle, because the triangle can help you see space around you, preemptively measuring that using your eye and your brain. For example, here is a corner, right? Here's a 3D corner. Let's say this is a room. And then you can see from here where lines intersect is a triangle. From there, you can see how each area or what kind of depth that you see just by looking at triangle where everything intersects. These are 3 triangles. One is over here, one is over here, and one is over here. Now, when drawing triangles, doesn't have to be perfect like the square, but try to get it as equal as you can, and maybe in different ways too, like this one. Here's a triangle on its side. As you can see, what you learned from drawing squares is that part of it is just what makes a triangle. Now, with triangles, you'll try to get used to also doing diagonal lines as well. Now, give it some time and some practice. Start with a square, like before. Light, thin lines. Light and thin lines, as well as a triangle. Doesn't have to be perfect. Can overshoot some, as long as you get the shape down. It's either tall or even a rectangle. As long as you can make a straight square, not a square that's like this. We all been there. But once you get to making straight lines like that for both the triangle and the square, you'll quickly see what's missing if you're looking at real life. An example of that is curving. So when you're making line strokes, right, it curves sometimes. Now, to master that, you could actually make yourself circles. These circles will help you get a grip on curves. It doesn't have to be a perfect circle, but if you're trying all of this out, like making curves and all, you'll quickly realize if you just do one single stroke for all of these circles, you'll never make a perfect one. Or there's a very low chance to even make a perfect one. This could be considered a perfect circle, but for me, this part is flatter. So here's a tip for making circles. Just like squares and triangles, I want you to do light and fast curves. Try to imagine a circle that you're making a curve from. If it doesn't help you, just try to rotate your arm, not necessarily your wrist. Your wrist would hurt more if you do that. Rotate your arm and make circular patterns of it, and then start to lightly sketch a nice little circle. Once you get used to that, you could just make a circle without any problem, like this. Just light, quick circles. When you're ready to commit, that's the only time that you're going to do heavy strokes, making sure it's also going through the same pattern as before. Remember, it fills in the role that it's not a straight line. So, for example, here's a circle on a square. You could make a rounded square just by having that partial circle on it. All of these shapes are not only used for sketching, but also for breaking down everything around you, from scenes, from objects, to even simple little concepts. An example of that, here's a simple scene that I sketched out for you guys. Now, for breaking down, all I have to ask you is this. Can you see these 3 shapes around all of them? And that's what we call breaking down. If you can see these simple shapes in the environment, you should easily be able to spot how most of these things are made. For example, Let's look at the house over here. This house has quite a few little shapes. If you can see, there's already a triangle over here. How about this one? It's also a rectangle followed by another rectangle. This one's just a cut off triangle, and the top is just a rectangle again, joining these two triangles together. Okay, how about the lamppost over here? Just a simple circle, followed by a rectangle. Okay, how about something a bit more challenging? How about these trees? These trees has a general shape in them. These trees just surround a circle, making the general shape of it, branched by rectangles. Even though they're not perfect rectangles, they're deformed into something like a supporting branch. How about the waterfall? It's just 1/4 of a circle, followed by another, if you can see it right, closed by a line on top, and the rest of the waterfall, just a rectangle. Now, this is just a sketch here, but let me grab you a real life example. Okay, here's an example of ice cream. Like before, let's break it down, shall we? Well, it's kind of obvious what kind of shapes ice cream has. Like this ice cream, it's just one big circle over here. Even at the back, that's just a circle. Even the cone. The cone, simply a triangle. Just both of them triangles. The glass itself as well. It's kind of a mixture between a triangle and a square if you look at it. Just somewhat closed off. Same for the ice cream at the back. Now, here's a house that I also have just Google search. All resources will be at the description, by the way. Okay, like before, the square, the triangle, and a circle. What kind of shapes can you see in this house? Well, I, for once, the roof is just a triangle supported by a rectangle. Also here, it's a rectangle. The windows are also rectangles over here. And the roof, rectangles. The chimney is also a rectangle. How about this door? A rectangle. The top of this door, also a triangle supported by a rectangle. Okay, how about this? I bet you didn't see that circle over there. How about here, this bend? Just a half circle over there, supported by a square. Now, it's not only just buildings and objects that you could get shapes out of, even in nature too. Have you seen the shapes here yet? Well, let's give it a second. If you haven't seen it yet, it's a big example of circle. But where's the circle, you may ask? Well, it's actually the general shape of this tree. Just like that, supported by a rectangle. Not only you can see them in objects, nature, and architecture, even in simple characters and animals and humans. Here's a Pikachu. Just by looking at it, if you can identify all of these shapes, you can easily get the anatomy of a character. For example, Pikachu's head is just a circle. The cheeks, just another circle, just flattened. How about the ears? Kind of a rounded triangle, if you ask me, or an ellipses. Quick side note, an ellipses is just a flattened out circle. Could also work sideways or diagonally if you want. Not a perfect circle. How about the body? The lower body, just two circles supported by somewhat of a square, extending out like that. The hands, or the paws rather, just extensions, is circle. The tail, even the tail. Look at these rectangles. These are just all rectangles. And the little feet, the little bitty feet, just circles down there. Once you see everything, you could easily just draw the general shapes around them. For example, this is the tree a while ago. Here's an example of a house. As long as you could see all of these shapes, you're well on your way to mastering art. Okay, just to recap before we end today's lesson, remember that with squares, they're the backbone of almost all architecture and objects, mastering also how you do your lines. The circle can do the other part, where it's curves, instead, filling in the roles of what square can't do. And the triangle is a way for you to measure space and perspective, trying to understand where different lines intersect. Now, all of these shapes are the fundamental thing about art. Without mastery of these basics, you'll quickly realize where you might falter, ending up to where you began. Now, as a final note, all of these three simple shapes are just shapes in definition, right? But in art, they're just two dimensional objects, two dimensional flat objects. And that means they have no depth to them. And that's what shapes are in art. As for assignments, I placed them in a separate video as to not keep you here if you're not keen on assignments. Just click here and I'll see you there. The lesson has now concluded, and my name is Mocha, and I'll see you guys on the next lesson. Ciao!